An island is burning, and an old man is on a phone call with the people who lit the fire. He is a scholar, not a soldier, and he is using his last minutes to walk the most powerful men in the world, calmly, toward a single conclusion: that the kingdom they erased 800 years ago was not weak or backward, but advanced, prosperous, admired. He builds the case piece by piece, and then, in the exact instant before the name of that kingdom can leave his mouth, they order him shot. The name dies in his throat, and to this day the world has never been allowed to hear it. That is one afternoon in the middle of One Piece's run, and the story kept burying afternoons exactly like it. Quiet, and then suddenly total, devastating in the specific way of things that have been building for 800 years before anyone thinks to look. Tonight is a slow walk through the secrets buried underneath all of it. Welcome to Anabrain. Let's get started. Section 1. The 100 Years That Were Erased. There is a strange thing about the world that One Piece takes place in. It is a world that remembers almost everything. Ships keep careful logs of where they have sailed. Small towns hold on to their old legends for generations. Scholars trace the rise and fall of kingdoms back across many centuries, naming the kings, the wars, the treaties, and the disasters. And yet, when all of those records are laid out in order and read from the oldest to the newest, a person will eventually run into something that should not be there: a gap. A clean, silent, deliberate gap. Somewhere around 800 years ago, the recorded history of the world simply stops. When it picks up again, a full 100 years has gone missing, and not a single official document in the entire world will say what happened during that time. That missing stretch of time has a name, even though almost nothing inside it does. People call it the Void Century, and others call it the Blank Century. Both names point at the same wound. For 100 years, the world did something, or had something done to it, that was important enough to bury. The strange part is not only that the memory is gone. The strange part is that someone went to enormous effort to make sure it stayed gone. And that effort has continued, without pause, for 8 centuries straight, all the way into the present day where Luffy and his crew are sailing right now. To understand how a thing like that is even possible, it helps to start with the one kind of record the world has never managed to destroy. Scattered across the planet, hidden inside ancient ruins, buried under temples, sunk beneath the sea, and locked away in places guarded by kings, there are enormous blocks of stone, covered in a script that almost no one alive can read. These stones are called poneglyphs. They are made from a material so hard that ordinary tools cannot scratch them, and ordinary force cannot break them. Fire does not mark them. Time does not wear them down. Whoever carved them chose that material on purpose because they wanted their words to survive anything, including the people who would one day try to erase them. The language on the poneglyphs is the heart of the secret. It is an old form of writing that fell out of use long ago, and the world government, the great authority that rules most of the world, has made the study of it one of the most serious crimes a person can commit. Learning to read that script is treated as an act of war against the world itself. The reason is simple once it is stated plainly. The poneglyphs are the true history. They are the voice of the people who lost the Void Century, calling forward across 800 years to anyone willing to listen, telling the version of events that the winners spent centuries trying to silence. This is where the story of a small island called Ohara becomes impossible to leave out, because Ohara is what happens to anyone who gets too close. Ohara was an island of scholars, home to a vast library known as the Tree of Knowledge, and the researchers who lived there had spent their lives studying the past. They were not soldiers. They were not pirates. They were academics who loved old books and old stones. And over many years of patient work, they had begun to do the one thing the world government cannot allow. They had begun to read the poneglyphs, and through them, to piece together what had really happened during the lost century. The response was not a warning. It was not a trial. The world government sent a buster call, which is the most destructive military action it has at its disposal. A coordinated bombardment by a fleet of warships meant to wipe a target off the map completely. Ohara, its library, its scholars, and almost everyone on it were destroyed in a single day. The official story that the world was given afterward claimed the scholars were dangerous criminals plotting to revive an ancient weapon and threaten the peace. The truth was quieter and far darker. Their only real crime had been curiosity. They had wanted to know the past, and for that, an entire island of people was erased, which is a chilling echo of the very century the government was trying to keep hidden. One moment from that day matters more than almost any other, and it explains the whole shape of the mystery. As Ohara burned, the lead scholar, a man named Professor Clover, managed to reach the 5 elders. the highest known leaders of the world government, through a communication device. He used his last minutes to lay out everything the scholars had figured out, building his case piece by piece, leading toward a single conclusion. He explained that the lost kingdom of the Void Century had not been a small or backward place. It had been powerful, advanced, and admired. And then, just as he reached the most important point, just as he was about to say the actual name of that lost kingdom out loud, the 5 elders ordered him shot. He was silenced in the exact instant before the name could leave his mouth. That single detail tells the audience something the government would never say directly. The name of the lost kingdom is dangerous on its own. Not a weapon, not a treasure, a name. The leaders of the world were willing to let a scholar describe the kingdom, its strength, and its fall. But the moment the name itself was about to be spoken, they killed him to stop it. To this day, the name of that kingdom has never been revealed in the story, and Oda has kept it hidden so carefully that it stands as one of the single most protected secrets in the entire series. Whatever that name is, it carries enough meaning to be worth 800 years of murder. From the ruins of Ohara came the one survivor who would carry its purpose forward. A small girl named Nico Robin escaped the Buster Call, and she grew up to become the only living person able to read the ancient script, which made her one of the most hunted individuals in the world from childhood. Her dream is not gold or fame. Her dream is to find the Rio Poneglyph, the single stone said to connect all the others, the one that, when read together with the rest, finally tells the complete true history of the world. Everything the scholars of Ohara died for now rests inside one quiet woman traveling on a pirate ship, which is why the government has never stopped wanting her gone. So what actually happened during those 100 years? The story has only ever come out in fragments, and many of the most important pieces are still missing, so it is worth being honest about how much remains uncertain. What canon has made clear is this. Roughly 800 years ago, a war was fought. On one side stood a great kingdom, the advanced and prosperous nation whose name cannot be spoken. On the other side stood an alliance of 20 separate kingdoms. The alliance won. The great kingdom was destroyed so completely that its people, its ideas, and its history were scrubbed out of the world. The 20 victorious kingdoms then joined their power together and created the organization that still rules today, the world government. 19 of those royal families left their homelands behind and moved to a city built high above the rest of the world, a place called Marijua, where their descendants live now as the celestial dragons, treated as living gods. The losers of that war were not allowed to simply fade away in peace. Their entire existence became forbidden knowledge. And here is the move that turns a historical tragedy into an active, ongoing mystery. Before they fell, the people of the Lost Kingdom carved their truth into those indestructible stones and spread them across the world, gambling that one day, long after they were gone, someone would come along who could read them and finish what they started. Recent chapters have even put a name to part of this effort, pointing to a woman called Nefertari D. Lily, who is tied to the spreading of the poneglyphs and who carries that mysterious initial in the middle of her name. Her appearance is one of the newest pieces of the puzzle, and how all of her actions fit together is still being revealed, so it is best treated as a thread the story is actively unwinding rather than a settled fact. The deeper a person looks, the clearer it becomes that the people of the Void Century were not only recording the past, they were sending a message into the future, and they expected it to be received at a specific time. When the legendary pirate king, Roger, finally reached the last island and learned the full truth, his reaction was not triumph. He and his crew understood everything at last, and then said that they had arrived too early. They had cracked the greatest secret in the world, and the answer was that the world was not yet ready for it. There was an appointed time still to come, a moment the Lost Kingdom had been waiting for, and Roger had simply gotten there before it arrived. That single idea, that the past is waiting patiently for the right person at the right moment, hangs over the entire series like a held breath. In the most recent stretch of the story, set on the Island of Giants, the buried history has begun to surface again, in ways that go even further back than the war of 800 years ago. Ancient murals and old texts kept by the Giants have started to describe a history of the world divided into separate ages, with hints of an even earlier civilization that was wiped out by something the records call a great serpent of fire. A figure remembered as the first king of the world has been named, a being whose mention alone was enough to stir a powerful reaction from the shadowy ruler hidden at the top of the government. These newer pieces are still being placed, and the full picture is far from clear, so the wise approach is to hold them loosely. What they confirm beyond doubt is that the Void Century was not the beginning of the world's hidden story. It may only be the most recent layer of a secret that reaches back much, much further. The reason all of this matters, the reason it sits underneath every other mystery in the series, comes down to one quiet, frightening fact. The strongest people in the story have all hinted that uncovering the true history would not simply settle an old debate. It would shake the world to its foundation. A dying Whitebeard, one of the most powerful pirates who ever lived, warned that the day the great treasure was found, it would drag the entire world into a war unlike anything seen before. The brilliant scientist Vegapunk, in a message broadcast across the planet, made clear that the truth of the Void Century is bound up with the fate of the world itself. Even Silver's Rayleigh, the right hand of the Pirate King and one of the few living people who knows the truth, offered to tell Nico Robin the whole history when she asked, and yet seemed reluctant to even speak of it, as if the words themselves carried a weight he did not want to place on her. 100 years were taken out of the world, and a great kingdom was erased so thoroughly that saying its name can still get a person killed. The people who lost wrote their truth into stone and trusted the future to come and find it. And 800 years later, that truth is finally beginning to surface. One stone, one mural, one forbidden name at a time. Every other secret in One Piece, the weapons, the rulers, the bloodlines, and the treasure at the end of the sea, all of them grow out of this single buried 100 years. It is the soil the entire world is planted in, and the story has spent its whole run slowly, carefully digging it back up. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The Void Century gave the world a buried truth, and a small girl carrying the only key to read it, a history written in stone, and waiting for the right moment to be spoken aloud. But running quietly through that entire lost age is a single mysterious letter, passed down through scattered strangers who all seem born to stand against the ones who rule. Next, the meaning hidden inside the initial D, Section 2. The ones called D. A name is usually the most ordinary thing about a person. It is the word a mother chooses in a quiet room, the word written down on a birth record, the word that friends shorten and call out across a crowded street. For most people in most stories, a name is only a label, and it carries no weight beyond pointing at the one who answers to it. In the world of One Piece, that simple idea quietly breaks. Hidden inside the names of some of the most important figures in the entire series is a single letter, tucked into the middle where almost no one would think to look for meaning. The letter is D, and once a person learns to notice it, it begins appearing everywhere, in the names of heroes and monsters, of kings and criminals, scattered across distant seas and across many centuries, with no clear thread connecting one to the next. The boy at the very center of the story carries it. His full name is Monkey D. Luffy, and for a long stretch of his life, he had no idea that the letter sitting in his name meant anything at all. His grandfather carries it as well, the famous and fearsome marine hero Monkey D. Garp, a man who spent his whole career serving the very government that has every reason to fear his own bloodline. Luffy's father carries it too, Monkey D. Dragon, the most wanted man in the world and the leader of the great army working to tear the world government down from the inside. So within one single family, across 3 living generations, the same letter rests in the names of a cheerful young pirate, a loyal old soldier, and a hunted revolutionary. Before the search even begins, the pattern already refuses to settle into anything simple. Widen the view past that one family, and the letter only spreads further across the map. The Pirate King himself was born Gold D. Roger, though for most of his life the wider world never knew it. When his name was first carried across the seas, the world government quietly shortened it to Gold Roger, smoothing the letter out of the public record so that ordinary people would see only a famous pirate and never the mark hidden inside him. That small and deliberate act of editing is one of the clearest signs in the whole series that the government understands precisely what the letter means and would much prefer that no one else ever did. Roger's only son inherited the letter through his mother's side, born Portgas D. Ace. The man who would one day betray his own captain and set the world on fire carries it under his true name, Marshall D. Teach, better known as Blackbeard. A brilliant and deeply wounded doctor who became a pirate keeps it hidden as a closely guarded family secret, Trafalgar D. Waterlaw. A gentle giant who once worked for the government and gave his life to save a frightened child carried it, Jaguar D. Saul. And one of the most dreaded pirates of an older age, a man whose name still makes the powerful go quiet, was Rox D. Zebek. None of these people grew up side by side. They came from different islands, different families, and opposite sides of the law, and many of them never once crossed paths. A marine, a revolutionary, a kindly giant, a cold murderer, a pirate king, and a small boy from a forgotten village all share one letter and seemingly nothing else. That is the riddle at its plainest. A family name usually marks a single household living in a single place across a few generations. This letter marks people scattered over the entire world and stretched across hundreds of years, which means it cannot be a surname in the ordinary sense. It is something older and far stranger, something that moves through time the way a torch is passed from one runner to the next in a long night relay, never burning out, only changing hands. Within the story itself, this strange thing has been given a name. People call it the Will of D. The idea behind it is that the letter is not merely a marker, but a kind of inheritance, a purpose or a duty carried in the blood and handed down through the generations, very often to a person who has no notion of what it is they are carrying. Luffy does not rise each morning thinking about an ancient mission buried in his name. He thinks about food, about adventure, and about protecting the people he loves. And yet the story keeps quietly suggesting that something far larger is moving through him, the same current that once moved through Roger, a deep tide running beneath the surface of an otherwise simple life. How fiercely the government fears this inheritance can be measured by the lengths it has gone to in order to stamp out even a single child who might carry it. After Roger's death, his unborn son became the most hunted infant in the world, because the Marines understood that the Pirate King's blood might continue his line. To protect the baby, his mother, Portgas de Rouge, carried him inside her for 20 long months through sheer force of will, holding back his birth far past what should have been possible, so that the soldiers searching for a newborn from the right season would find nothing and give up. She died shortly after Ace was finally born, having spent her last strength to hide a single bloodline from the most powerful organization in the world. That is the weight the letter carries. A government willing to erase a whole island of scholars was also willing to hunt a baby across the sea, simply because of the blood in his veins. The most direct clue about what the letter actually means came from an unlikely and tragic source. A quiet man named Rosinante, who went by the name Corazon. He was the one who looked after Law during the darkest years of the boy's life, after Law's home of Flevivance had been wiped out and a strange illness had taken everything from him. Before Corazon died protecting the boy, he tried to make Law understand why their shared letter mattered so much. When he first heard Law's full name spoken aloud, Trafalgar D. Waterlaw, his reaction was not fear, but a strange, overwhelming emotion, because he recognized the mark at once. He told the boy that the people who carry the D are feared by the world government above nearly all else, and that an old and secret understanding exists among those who rule. In their eyes, the ones called D are the natural enemies of the gods. Those gods are not distant figures in the heavens. They are the celestial dragons, the descendants of the kings who won the Great War 800 years ago, and who now live high above the world as living deities. If the D are the natural enemies of those rulers, then the letter is no accident at all. It is a mark of opposition, a sign of the side that lost the Void Century and somehow never stopped resisting. That single idea pulls the whole scattered pattern into focus and ties it directly back to the buried 100 years. The lost Great Kingdom fell, its history was erased, and its name was made unspeakable across the entire world. But a people does not simply cease to exist because a record is destroyed and a name is forbidden. The strong suggestion running through the series, and it is fair to be honest that this remains a theory the story has not fully confirmed, is that the people called D are the inheritors of that fallen kingdom, the surviving thread of the side that the government defeated and tried so hard to bury. The letter, under this reading, becomes a quiet promise carried forward in secret for 8 long centuries, a reminder of an old defeat and an old purpose that has never been allowed to truly die. The very recent appearance of a Void Century figure named Nefertari D. Lily, a woman connected to the spreading of the poneglyphs and carrying the letter inside her own name, points firmly toward that idea, because she finally places the D inside the lost century itself, rather than only among the people of the present day. There is another detail about the people of D that is gentler than all the talk of wars and enemies, and somehow more haunting for it. Across the story, again and again, the ones who carry the letter tend to meet their deaths smiling. An old doctor, one of the first characters ever to give the inherited will a name, remarked on this pattern with a mixture of wonder and warning, noting that those who bear the D seem able to face the very end with something close to peace. The Pirate King, kneeling at his own public execution with the entire world watching and the blades already raised above him, did not weep and did not beg. He smiled, and with his final breath, he sent the whole world racing toward the sea. The giant Saul, surrounded by enemies and facing certain death on the shore of a burning island, laughed in his strange, booming way right up until the end. Something inside these people refuses to be crushed by fear, a kind of inner lightness that survives even when everything else has been taken from them. Whether this comes from the bloodline, from a shared belief, or simply from the way Oda chooses to draw them, the story has never spelled out, so it rests as a quiet pattern rather than a stated law. Yet it is a strange and beautiful thing to sit with, this family of strangers who keep dying with a smile on their faces. The deepest hint about what that smile might be reaching toward came at the moment of Roger's death, when his final words rippled out across the world. He did not speak of revenge or of regret. He spoke of inheritance. As long as people kept reaching for freedom, he said, the dream and the will would never stop being passed down, carried forward by the swell of each new age into the hands of whoever came next. That is the truest picture of what the will of D appears to be. It is less a family and more a flame, a thing that lives only by being handed on, surviving the death of every single person who ever held it, because there is always another set of hands waiting in the next generation. The newest layer of all has only deepened the question of where the letter itself even comes from. In the most recent stretch of the story, among the giants, old records have surfaced that speak of a figure remembered as the first king of the world, a being whose name carried enough power to stir a sharp and angry reaction from the hidden ruler at the very top of the government. That name has been tied to an old clan, and some readers have begun to wonder whether the single letter D might be the worn-down remnant of a longer name passed down and shortened across the ages. This thread is fresh, far from settled, and still being laid out piece by piece, so the honest position is to hold it as an open and exciting possibility rather than a finished answer. What it does confirm beyond doubt is that the roots of the D reach back even deeper than the Void Century, into a history the world has only just begun to glimpse again. Step away from all the separate clues, and a shape finally begins to form, even with so many pieces still missing. The D appears to be a hidden lineage of opposition, a long line of people marked by an old defeat and bound, whether they know it or not, to stand against the order that the world's rulers built on top of a buried truth. That is how a marine like Garp can carry it and still serve, how a revolutionary like Dragon can carry it and openly rebel, and how a boy like Luffy can carry it while caring about nothing grander than freedom and his friends. In their own separate ways, all of them are pushing against the same ancient wall. The government quietly erases the letter from its records, watches the seas for its return, and dreads the day it gathers strength, because every single person who carries it is a small living fragment of the side that was supposed to have been wiped out forever. What makes the whole thing settle so heavily on the heart is that the carriers themselves so rarely understand what they are. Roger appears to have learned the full truth only at the very end of his life, on the final island, when it was already far too late for him to act on it. Luffy sails the seas chasing a dream that has nothing to do with ancient kingdoms or buried wars, and yet he keeps arriving, again and again, at the exact center of every event that threatens the government's grip on the world. The will moves through these people whether they ask for it or not, and that is precisely what makes it feel like a will rather than a choice. A torch does not decide to be carried. It only burns and is handed forward, and burns again in the next set of hands, on and on through the long dark, until at last it reaches someone standing in the right place at the right hour, when the world is finally ready for the fire. The buried century gave the world a truth it could not speak aloud. The letter D gives that truth a living set of hands to carry it through the years. One is the message, and the other is the messenger, passed quietly down through 800 years of heroes and outlaws who, for the most part, never knew what they were a part of. And now, in the present day of the story, the largest gathering of those hands in living memory is coming together all at once. A king's son, a revolutionary's son, a doctor shaped by tragedy, and a boy who simply wants to be free, all carrying the same old letter toward the same hidden answer waiting at the end of the sea. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The letter D turns out to be a torch passed quietly through 8 centuries, a mark of the side that lost the void century and never stopped opposing the ones who rule. But every torch needs something to burn against, and at the very top of that order sits a figure the world was never even told existed. Next, the empty throne, and the silent ruler who has been sitting on it all along. Section 3. The empty throne and the one who sits on it. High above the rest of the world, on a holy patch of land that ordinary people are forbidden to set foot on, there is a room that holds a chair. The land is called Marie Joie, the city of the gods, where the descendants of the world's first kings live in luxury and look down on everyone below. And in the heart of that place sits a single throne that, for 800 years, was supposed to remain completely empty. The emptiness was the entire point of it. When the world was founded, the kings who built it made a solemn promise to one another, an agreement that no single person and no single nation would ever rise above all the rest. The throne was left bare to stand as the living symbol of that promise. As long as the seat stayed empty, the story went, the world was ruled by no one in particular, and all the great powers stood as equals beneath a chair that belonged to nobody. For most of the series, that was simply accepted as a piece of background, a grand old custom, a polite fiction about shared power, the kind of tradition that decorates a throne room without anyone questioning it too closely. The leaders the world could actually see were the 5 elders, a group of 5 ancient men who sat at the top of the world government and seemed to answer to no higher authority. They gave the orders. They decided who lived and who was erased. They appeared to be the final word on everything. And so the empty throne sat quietly in the corner of the story, looking like a museum piece, a relic of an old idea about fairness that no longer mattered very much. Then came the great gathering of kings known as the Reverie, an event held once every few years where the rulers of the world's nations traveled to Marie Joie to meet and discuss the future. The Reverie brought many of the story's royal characters into the same place at the same time, and it ended with one of the quietest and most chilling reveals the series has ever delivered. After all the kings had gone, after the halls had emptied, the story showed the throne room one last time. The throne was not empty. Someone was sitting on it. A shadowed figure occupied the seat that, by the oldest law in the world, no one was ever permitted to touch. That figure is called Emu. The name is short, almost gentle, and it belongs to a being whose existence the wider world has no idea about. The leaders everyone feared, the 5 elders themselves, turned out to be servants. When Emu was revealed, the 5 ancient men who supposedly ruled the world knelt and lowered their heads, treating the figure on the throne with total reverence. The promise of the empty seat had been a lie from the very beginning. For 8 centuries, while the world believed it was governed by an agreement of equals, a single hidden ruler had been sitting at the top of everything, watching, deciding, and staying carefully out of sight. The most powerful authority in the world was never the 5 elders. It was the one they bow to. What Emu chose to do in that first appearance told the audience exactly how this hidden ruler operates. Emu held a small set of images, pictures of specific people from across the world, and looked them over the way a person might sort through old letters before deciding which ones to throw away. Among the faces were the young pirate Luffy, the mermaid princess Shirahoshi, a leader of the Revolutionary Army, the pirate called Blackbeard, and a princess of an old royal line named Vivi. These were the individuals Emu had decided needed to be erased from history. Not arrested, not defeated in open battle. Erased, quietly and completely. The same way an island of scholars had once been erased, and the same way 100 years of history had been wiped from every record. The figure on the throne does not argue with enemies. It removes them, and then arranges for the world to forget they ever existed. How far that power reaches became horrifyingly clear a short while later, when an entire kingdom simply vanished. The small nation of Lulusia, a real place full of real people living ordinary lives, was wiped off the face of the world in an instant. There was no warning and no army. One moment the kingdom was there, and the next it was gone, struck from above by a force so enormous that it left almost nothing behind. The brilliant scientist Vegapunk later confirmed to the entire world that this destruction had been carried out using one of the ancient weapons, the very kind of world-ending power that the government has always claimed to fear in the hands of others. The order to use it traced back to the figure on the throne. Emu can erase a person, and Emu can erase a country, with the same cold calm. The question that hangs over all of this is the oldest and heaviest one. Who or what is Emu actually? Here the story becomes far more careful. And it is only fair to be honest about how little has been confirmed and how much remains open. Imu's face is rarely shown in full, often appearing as a dark silhouette or a strange, shifting shadow. Even the most basic facts about this ruler, things as simple as gender, have been left deliberately uncertain, with the story referring to Imu in a way that refuses to settle the matter. What seems increasingly clear, though never stated outright, is that Imu has been alive for an impossibly long time. The strong suggestion is that this is not a recent ruler, but an ancient one, a being whose reign may stretch all the way back to the Void Century itself, to the very war that founded the world. Several threads point toward that idea, even if none of them closes the case. The five elders, Imu's loyal servants, appear in a flashback to a battle that took place decades before the present story, and they look exactly the same then as they do now, showing no sign of aging across a span of years that should have left clear marks on any normal person. If the servants do not age, the suggestion that their master does not age either becomes very hard to ignore. The leading explanation among readers is that Imu, and likely the elders as well, have found some way to escape death entirely, whether through an ancient power, a hidden technology, or a kind of immortality that the world has long forgotten. The story has not confirmed how, so the wise approach is to treat the immortality of Imu as a powerful and well-supported theory rather than a settled fact. But a ruler who has personally lived through the Void Century would explain a great deal, including why the truth of those 100 years must be buried at any cost. If Imu was there, then Imu is not hiding someone else's secret. Imu is hiding its own. The recent stretch of the story has pushed this line of thinking even further, while raising fresh mysteries of its own. In flashbacks to an old and terrible battle from the past, Imu appears as a force already shaping the world from the shadows, present at events that defined the modern age. Old records uncovered among the giants describe a figure remembered as the first king of the world, a name that, when spoken, stirred a sharp and furious reaction from Imu, as though it touched an old wound that is never fully healed. And recent pages have depicted a scene from the founding of the world in which the kings who built the government appear to be offering something to a single crowned figure, widely understood to be Imu, suggesting that the rulers bowed to this being even at the very beginning. These pieces are new, and the story is still arranging them, so they are best held as fresh clues rather than finished answers. What they share is a single direction. They all point at a ruler whose roots run straight down into the buried century, the one stretch of time the world is forbidden to remember. There is one image that ties Imu to the deepest mystery in the entire series, and it is worth sitting with quietly. Hidden beneath Mary Joie, in a chamber kept away from every prying eye, there is an enormous straw hat, ancient and worn, resting where almost no one will ever see it. It looks remarkably like the simple straw hat that Luffy wears, the one passed to him by Shanks, the one that has traveled with him across every sea. Imu was shown standing before that giant hat while holding Luffy's wanted poster, studying the young pirate's face against the relic of some long-dead figure. The connection is unmistakable, even if its meaning is not yet clear. Whoever once wore that giant hat was important enough to be kept locked beneath the Holy Land for centuries, and important enough that the sight of a boy carrying its smaller echo would draw the hidden ruler's full attention. That ancient wearer, and the promise tied to him, is a story all its own, and it waits just ahead. Pull the threads together, and the shape of Imu emerges, even with the face still in shadow. There is a ruler at the top of the world who was never supposed to exist, sitting on a throne that was sworn to remain empty, served by ancient men who pretend to be the highest power, while kneeling in private to someone higher still. This ruler can erase individuals and entire nations, decides in secret who history will remember and who it will forget, and almost certainly carries the truth of the Void Century inside its own long memory. Whether Imu was the conqueror who destroyed the lost Great Kingdom, or a survivor of it who turned against its own people, or something stranger that the story has not yet hinted at, remains one of the most carefully guarded secrets Oda has ever kept. Every reasonable guess is still only a guess, and the figure on the throne is in no hurry to explain itself. What makes Imu so unsettling is not the power, terrible as that power is. It is the patience. A ruler who can wipe out a kingdom in a single moment has instead spent 800 years sitting quietly in the dark, letting the world believe it governs itself, intervening only when something threatens the secret at the center of everything. Imu does not need to be seen. Imu does not need to be feared by name. The empty throne does the work of hiding the truth. The five elders do the work of giving orders, and the figure in the shadows simply watches the whole world turn beneath a chair that everyone believes belongs to no one. For most of the series, that lie held perfectly. And then a boy in a straw hat began sailing toward the end of the sea, carrying the small echo of an ancient promise. And the ruler who had hidden so patiently for 8 centuries finally reached for a wanted poster and decided that this one would have to be erased. The throne was meant to prove that no one ruled above the rest. Instead, it became the perfect hiding place for the one who rules above them all. And the more the world learns about the hidden century, the clearer it grows that the figure on that throne is not protecting an old peace at all. Imu is protecting the memory of an old victory and guarding it against the slow, patient return of the side that lost. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The empty throne was a promise of equals, and Imu turned it into the perfect mask for a ruler who has watched the world in silence since the Void Century itself. Yet Imu's fury at one ancient name and the giant straw hat kept locked beneath the Holy Land both point back to a single rival from that lost age. Next, the warrior who made a promise and swore he would one day return. Section 4. The warrior who promised to return. Long before the world had its current borders, before the government rose and the seas were named, there were people living in chains, slaves, captured and worked and treated as less than human, scattered across an old and cruel world. People in that situation have very little to hold on to, and so they did what suffering people have always done. They told a story. They passed around the legend of a figure who would one day come for them. A warrior they called the sun god Nika. He was not a stern god of judgment or a distant god of the sky. He was a god who danced. The legend said that Nika fought with complete freedom, that he moved however he wished and bent the world around him like it was made of nothing, and that when he arrived, he would free the enslaved and send them off not with grim ceremony, but with laughter. He would make them smile. For people who had nothing, the idea that liberation itself might arrive wearing a grin was a small, warm light to carry in the dark. For a very long time in the series, Nika was treated as exactly that. A comforting old myth with no body behind it. A jailer in the world's deepest prison once told the legend to a prisoner, almost as a fairy tale, the kind of story that gets handed down without anyone checking whether it was ever true. And it might have stayed a fairy tale forever, except that the story of One Piece has a habit of taking its oldest legends and revealing, slowly and carefully, that they were real all along. The truth about Nika arrived through the unlikeliest door imaginable. Luffy, the cheerful boy at the center of everything, had eaten a devil fruit as a child, a fruit that turned his body to rubber and let him stretch like elastic. For hundreds of chapters, it was treated as a slightly silly power, the Gum Gum fruit, a goofy ability that suited a goofy hero. Then, during the great battles of the later story, the 5 elders themselves let the secret slip in a moment of alarm. Luffy's fruit was never really the Gum Gum fruit at all. Its true name is the human fruit, model Nika, one of the rarest and most legendary fruits in the entire world, a mythical power tied directly to the ancient sun god. The government had known this for 800 years. They had wanted that fruit so badly and feared it so deeply that they had given it a false and harmless-sounding name and let the whole world believe it was a joke, all so that no one would ever come looking for the warrior of liberation. The detail that turns this from a fun twist into something genuinely strange is what the fruit had been doing during those 8 centuries. The government tried again and again to capture it, and again it slipped away from them, as if the fruit itself did not wish to be held by the wrong hands. The strong impression the story gives, without ever quite stating it as fact, is that the power has a will of its own, and that it waited, patiently, across hundreds of years, until it finally reached a boy who would use it the way the old legend promised. When Luffy first ate it, he had no idea he was carrying the most hunted fruit in the world. He simply thought he had become rubber. The warrior of liberation had arrived in the world again, and even he did not know it. Standing behind the myth of Nika is a second figure, a real one. And untangling the two is one of the more delicate things the story has asked its readers to do. That figure is Joy Boy. Where Nika is the ancient god of the legend, Joy Boy was a person, a real individual who lived during the buried Void Century and played a major role in the war that shook the old world. Recent parts of the story have worked hard to make clear that these two are not simply the same being under 2 names. The most direct reading of the newer information is that Nika is the older legend, the spirit and the name of the power, while Joy Boy was a human being who once carried that power and fought with it. This distinction is still being shaded in by the story, and exactly how cleanly the two can be separated remains a little uncertain, so it is fair to hold the details loosely. What matters is the shape of it. Nika is the myth. Joy Boy was the man who, 800 years ago, became the warrior the myth describes. Joy Boy left fingerprints all over the ancient world, and the gentlest of them is also the saddest. On the poneglyph hidden at the bottom of the sea on Fishman Island, there is a message written in his own words, and it is not a boast or a battle cry. It is an apology. Joy Boy wrote to apologize because there was a promise he had made and could not keep. He had pledged something to the people of that island, and to an enormous ancient ship called Noah, a vessel built to carry a great many people toward a future that never came. Whatever he had sworn to do, the events of the Void Century stopped him from doing it. And so the most powerful warrior of his age spent some of his final strength writing down how sorry he was, leaving the promise behind for someone in the distant future to finish in his place. A man strong enough to fight the entire world, ending his story by saying that he had let people down. That single poneglyph tells the audience more about who Joy Boy was than any list of his victories ever could. The promise did not die with him. It became a kind of debt the world has been waiting 800 years to repay, and it links directly to the strange business of the appointed time. When the pirate King Roger reached the final island and learned the full truth, he laughed and said that he and his crew had arrived too early. He spoke of Joy Boy almost fondly, as if he had come to know the man across the centuries through the records he had read, and he expressed a wish that he could have lived in the same age, that he could have sailed alongside him. Roger understood that the promise was not his to keep. He had simply arrived before the right person and the right moment, and so he left everything where it was and trusted the future to send someone better suited to the task. That trust was finally answered in one of the most powerful scenes in the entire series, deep in the country of Wano. Luffy, beaten down and seemingly defeated, his heart faltering, suddenly heard something. An ancient rhythm, a beat the story calls the drums of liberation, began to sound, and his own heartbeat fell into step with it. His fruit awakened in full for the first time, and the silly rubber power revealed itself as something joyful and limitless, a fighting style built entirely on freedom. And far away, the enormous ancient creature that has wandered the seas for 1,000 years lifted its voice and announced, to no one and to everyone, that Joy Boy had returned. After 800 years of waiting, the warrior of liberation had come back to the world, this time in the body of a laughing boy who only ever wanted to be free. It is worth being clear about one thing the story has taken care to settle, because it is easy to misread. Luffy is not Joy Boy reborn. He is not the same soul returned, not a reincarnation in the literal sense. And the story has gone out of its way to avoid that simpler explanation. What connects Luffy to Joy Boy is the power and the will, the fruit that carries Nika's name and the spirit of liberation that comes with it. Joy Boy was the first to carry that will into battle against the world. Luffy is the next. The title of Joy Boy, in this reading, belongs to whoever takes up the warrior's power and the warrior's promise, which means it was never really one person's name at all. It was a role, waiting across the centuries for the right person to step into it. Why the government fears all of this so completely starts to make sense once these pieces sit together. The hidden ruler at the top of the world, the figure on the empty throne, appears to have been the great rival of the Void Century, the one who won the war that Joy Boy lost. The giant straw hat locked away beneath the Holy Land, the one that the hidden ruler studied while holding Luffy's wanted poster, is widely believed to be a relic of that ancient warrior, kept as a trophy or a warning by the side that defeated him. To the rulers of the world, the return of Nika is not just the rise of a strong pirate. It is the return of their oldest enemy, the warrior who once nearly undid everything, the man who made a promise to overturn the order they built on top of a buried truth. They renamed his power and hid it for 800 years, precisely so this day would never come, and now the drums have sounded anyway. There are deeper questions still waiting under all of this, and the honest thing is to name them as open. Some readers believe Joy Boy and the hidden ruler were not only rivals, but family, a theory that has resurfaced recently and that the story has not confirmed. The newest chapters, set among the giants, have tied the worship of the sun god directly into the culture of that ancient race, raising the possibility that Nika's origins reach into the history of the giants themselves. The true nature of the promise Joy Boy made, the exact thing the future is meant to finish, has not been fully revealed either. These threads are alive and unsettled, and the story is still drawing them out, so they belong in the realm of careful speculation rather than fact. What stands firmly is the heart of it. A warrior once fought the world for the sake of freedom, made a promise he could not keep, and apologized to the future for failing. And 800 years later, that promise has found a new pair of hands. The most moving part of the whole legend is how little the new warrior understands of the weight he carries. Luffy does not fight because of an ancient war or a buried betrayal. He fights because a friend is in danger, because someone is being crushed who does not deserve it, because a person should be free to live the way they choose. The grand cosmic role of the warrior of liberation and the small, stubborn kindness of one cheerful boy turn out to be the very same thing. Nika frees people with a smile. Luffy has been doing exactly that, island after island, since long before anyone told him there was a name for it. The myth the slaves told one another in the dark was not describing some distant savior. It was describing a way of being in the world, a refusal to let anyone stay in chains. And it finally walked back into the story, wearing a straw hat and grinning at everything. A promise was made in a century the world is not allowed to remember, and then it was broken, and then it waited. It waited through the rise of the government, through the long silence of the poneglyphs, through the death of a pirate king who came too soon. And now the drums have started again. The warrior who swore he would return has returned, the same way he always promised, with laughter instead of grief. And the rulers who hid his power for 800 years are about to learn that some promises are simply too old and too stubborn to stay broken forever. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Joy Boy made a promise of liberation he could not keep, and across 800 years, that promise has finally found new hands in a laughing boy who never knew he carried it. Yet the warrior left more behind than a vow, including ancient instruments of war, powerful enough to reshape the seas and the land themselves. Next, the weapons that can end the world. Section 5. The weapons that can end the world. The lost kingdom of the Void Century was not a primitive place. Everything the story has slowly revealed points the other way, toward a civilization that was advanced, clever, and far ahead of its time. A people who understood things about the world that have since been forgotten by almost everyone. A nation like that does not only leave behind words carved in stone, it leaves behind tools, machines, and in the worst cases, weapons. And the people of that kingdom built 3 of the most terrifying weapons the world has ever known. Powers so great that the mere knowledge of them is part of why the entire century had to be buried. Their names were written into the poneglyphs alongside the true history, and they have haunted the story from very early on. Poseidon, Pluton, Uranus. 3 names borrowed from old gods, given to 3 creations capable of unmaking the world. For a long time, these were spoken of only in whispers and warnings. Robin, the lone survivor able to read the ancient script, knew their names from her studies, and she understood that the world government would do anything to keep them out of the wrong hands, while also wanting them very much for its own. The weapons sat in the background of the series like a loaded threat, a reminder that the buried century did not only contain secrets and shame, it contained firepower, sleeping somewhere out in the world, waiting to be found. What makes the 3 weapons so fascinating is that they turned out to be far stranger than anyone expected. They are not 3 identical doomsday machines sitting in a vault. Each one is a separate kind of mystery, and the slow reveal of what they actually are has reshaped the whole story. Of the 3, Poseidon was the first to be truly understood, and the answer was the most surprising thing imaginable. Poseidon is not a machine at all. It is a person. Specifically, it is a mermaid, a princess born with a power so rare that the world goes for centuries between sightings of it. The bearer of Poseidon can speak to the sea kings, the colossal sea monsters that dwarf entire islands and could sink a fleet without effort. And more than that, she can command them. An ordinary person hearing the sea kings would hear nothing but noise. The one who carries Poseidon can call them, calm them, and send them wherever she wishes, which means she holds the power of an army that lives beneath the waves. There is not always such a person alive. The ability appears in a single mermaid princess once in a great while, and then vanishes again for generations. In the present day of the story, that power lives in a gentle, timid giant of a girl named Shirahoshi, the princess of Fishman Island, who for most of her life was so frightened of the world that she rarely left her room. The idea that the most fearsome ancient weapon in the world is a shy young girl who cries easily is exactly the kind of contrast the series loves, and it carries a quiet meaning. A weapon, in the usual sense, has no choice about how it is used. A person does. Shirahoshi could call the Sea Kings to drown a nation, or she could simply refuse, and that choice is hers in a way it could never be for a cannon or a battleship. Her existence also ties straight back to the broken promise of the Void Century. The previous bearer of Poseidon, a mermaid who lived during those buried years, made an agreement with Joy Boy involving the great Ark Noah and the Sea Kings, a promise meant to be carried out by a future Poseidon once the right time arrived. Shirahoshi is that future princess. She inherited not only a terrifying power, but an 800-year-old debt, and the hidden ruler of the world knows exactly who she is, which is why her face was among those marked for erasure. The second weapon, Pluton, is the one that fits the word weapon most plainly. Pluton is an ancient warship, a vessel so monstrous in its power that the records describe it as able to wipe an entire island off the map with a single shot. Unlike Poseidon, Pluton appears to be an actual built thing, a ship of war from the Lost Age, and for a long stretch of the story, its blueprints were one of the most dangerous documents in existence. The plans for Pluton were secretly preserved and handed down across many generations by a line of master shipwrights in the city of Water 7, kept hidden so that if the world government ever managed to revive the ancient warship, someone in the world would have the knowledge to build a second Pluton and stand against it. That secret nearly destroyed the lives of the people who carried it. When the government came hunting for the blueprints, the shipwright known as Frankie chose to burn them rather than let them fall into cruel hands, deciding that the safest place for such knowledge was nowhere at all. Where the actual Pluton lies is one of the threads the story has dangled for years. The strongest hint, repeated more than once, is that the ancient warship is hidden somewhere beneath the land of Wano, sealed away long ago and guarded by the secrets of the Kozuki family. The same family tied so deeply to the poneglyphs and the buried century. That location remains the most supported answer, though the weapon itself has not yet been shown. And here the theories grow especially wild, because some readers are not convinced Pluton is only a ship. There are ideas that the great creature wandering the seas might secretly be Pluton, a living warship cursed to walk forever. There are ideas that Pluton, like Poseidon, might be a person who can control something enormous. There are even ideas that the crew's own beloved ship could be tied to the weapon's legacy. None of these has been confirmed, and they sit firmly in the land of speculation, so they are best enjoyed as possibilities rather than treated as answers. What is solid is the warship's reputation. Pluton is the buried cannon of the old world, and somewhere it is still waiting. The third weapon, Uranus, was for the longest time the deepest blank of all. Where Poseidon had a face and Pluton had blueprints, Uranus had almost nothing. The name pointed at an old god of the sky, which led many to guess that the weapon had something to do with the heavens, that perhaps it could fly, or strike from above, or control the weather itself. But guesses were all anyone had, and Uranus remained a single, ominous word on the poneglyphs with no body attached to it. That changed in a way that was as horrifying as it was revealing. The small kingdom of Lulusia, a peaceful nation full of ordinary people, was annihilated in an instant by a force that came down from the sky, leaving almost nothing behind. The scientist Vegapunk later confirmed to the whole world that this destruction had been carried out using one of the ancient weapons, powered by a strange and immense energy source. The order had come from the hidden ruler at the top of the world. The strong and widely held belief is that the weapon used on Lulusia is Uranus, since Uranus was the only one of the three whose location was completely unknown, and since the attack matched the old guesses about a power that strikes from the sky. If that is correct, then the most frightening of the three weapons is not lost or buried at all. It is already in the hands of the government, fully functional, and the Lulusia attack was a demonstration of how casually they are willing to use it. It must be said clearly that the story has not yet stated outright that the Lulusia weapon is Uranus by name, so the identification is a very strong reading rather than a confirmed fact. The energy that powered it, a force the story calls the Mother Flame, is itself a new and only partly understood piece, and how it connects to the ancient weapon is still being revealed. But the message of the attack was unmistakable, regardless of the weapon's exact name. The doomsday powers of the Lost World are no longer only a threat in old stories. At least one of them is operating right now. Step back and the three weapons together tell a single chilling story about power and who is allowed to hold it. They are the surviving teeth of a civilization that was destroyed for reasons the world is forbidden to know. The government's endless hunt for poneglyph readers, its destruction of O'Hara, its fear of anyone learning the true history. All of it is partly a hunt for these weapons, for control over the only forces capable of ending the world it has built. And the deep irony, the thing the story has quietly pointed at since the City of Water 7, is that the government has always claimed these weapons are too dangerous for anyone else to possess, while reserving the right to possess and use them itself. The destruction of Lulusia tore the mask off that claim completely. The ones who warn most loudly about world-ending weapons in dangerous hands turned out to be holding the deadliest one of all. There is a gentler thread running underneath all the destruction, and it lives in Poseidon. 2 of the 3 weapons are objects, things that can be aimed and fired and that have no say in the matter. But the most powerful of the ancient weapons, the one that commands the very creatures of the sea, is a frightened young girl with a kind heart and a choice of her own. That single fact reframes the whole idea of an ancient weapon. A thing has no conscience, a person does. The Lost Kingdom built warships and harnessed energy, but it also passed its greatest power into a living bloodline, into someone who could decide for herself whether to destroy or to protect. Whatever the people of that buried century intended, they left the deadliest of their creations in the one form that could refuse to be a weapon at all. The names sit there on the poneglyphs still, 3 old gods carved into unbreakable stone by a people the world tried to forget. Poseidon swims in the deep, a shy princess carrying the will of the sea and an ancient promise. Pluton sleeps somewhere beneath the earth, a buried cannon waiting for a hand to wake it. Uranus, if the reading holds, hangs over everything in the grip of the hidden ruler, already proven, already used. 3 weapons strong enough to unmake the world, scattered across the seas and the land and the sky, all of them inheritances from 100 years no one is allowed to remember. And as the warrior of liberation sails closer to the truth, the question is no longer whether these powers will be woken. It is who will be holding them when the world finally turns. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. 3 ancient weapons sleep across the sea and sky. One of them a frightened girl, one a buried warship, and one already in the hidden ruler's hands. Yet there may be a 4th force wandering the world in plain sight, an island-sized creature that has carried a punishment for 1,000 years. Next, the elephant that cannot stop walking, and the crime no one will name. Section 6. The elephant that has been walking for 1,000 years. Out in the most dangerous waters of the world, sailors sometimes see something on the horizon that their minds refuse to accept. It looks at first like a mountain, or a strange, dark island, or a bank of low clouds sitting on the water. Then it moves. Not the slow drift of an island carried by a current, but the deliberate, rolling motion of something walking. What they are looking at is a living creature so enormous that an entire country sits on its back. A beast the size of an island that has been wading through the open sea, step after patient step, for more than 1,000 years. Its name is Zunisha, and it is one of the oldest and saddest mysteries in the whole of One Piece. Zunisha is an elephant, though calling it that almost feels like a joke given the scale of the thing. Its legs rise out of the ocean like vast towers, so tall that the water barely reaches partway up them. On its back rests a land of forests and mountains, and a tribe of animal people called the Minks, who have lived their entire history on this moving island, without most of them ever fully understanding what carries them. Generations of Minks have been born, lived, and died on the elephant's back, knowing only that their home is alive and always traveling, never stopping, never resting, always pressing forward across an endless sea toward no destination anyone can name. The first thing that marks Zunisha as something far stranger than a simple giant animal is its age. The creature is well over 1,000 years old, which places its birth before the founding of the world government, before the Great War of the Void Century, back in or even before the very century that the world is forbidden to remember. That single fact turns Zunisha into something precious and terrible at once. It is a living witness. While every written record of the lost century was hunted down and destroyed, while scholars were killed for trying to read stone, this enormous creature simply kept walking through all of it, carrying its memories of the old world in a mind as ancient as the secrets themselves. Whatever happened during those buried years, Zunisha may well have seen it happen, and yet the creature does not speak of it. Here lies the heart of its mystery. When the crew finally reached Zunisha and learned that it was alive and aware, the elephant told them something that has hung over the story ever since. Long ago, it said, it had committed a crime. For that crime, it was sentenced. and the sentence was this: to walk, to keep walking, forever, across the sea, never stopping, until the end of its days. For over 1,000 years, Zunisha has obeyed that punishment without pause, placing one massive foot in front of the other through storms and calm and endless empty water, carrying a country and a tribe and the weight of an ancient guilt it has never been allowed to set down. What that crime actually was, the story has never revealed. This is one of the places where it is most important to be honest about how little is known, because almost everything beyond the basic facts is guesswork. Zunisha did not explain what it had done. It did not name who passed the sentence or when, or why the punishment was endless walking rather than anything else. The creature carries its guilt the way it carries the country on its back, silently and completely, and the reasons stay locked inside a mind older than the government itself. Readers have spent years trying to imagine what an island-sized elephant could possibly have done to deserve 1,000 years of wandering. And the truth is that no one outside the author knows. The crime is a blank, deliberately left empty, waiting like so many other things in this story for an answer that has not yet come. There is one more rule that governs Zunisha's existence, and it makes its situation even more heartbreaking. The creature cannot act on its own. For all its impossible size and strength, it is forbidden, or perhaps unable, to do anything beyond walking unless it is given a direct command by someone with the right to command it. This became clear during a moment of real danger, when a brutal pirate named Jack attacked Zunisha directly, hacking at its legs in an attempt to bring the whole island down. Zunisha, a being that could crush a fleet with a single motion, simply endured the assault, taking the wounds without fighting back, because it had not been told it was allowed to. It asked, in its quiet, ancient way, whether it should retaliate, and waited for permission like a soldier under orders that have lasted 1,000 years. That permission came from a young boy named Momonosuke, of the Kozuki family, a bloodline tied deeply to the poneglyphs and the buried century. Momonosuke carried a rare and precious gift, the ability known as the voice of all things, which lets a person hear and speak to creatures and objects that the rest of the world experiences as silent. With that voice, he gave Zunisha the command it had been waiting for, telling it that it could defend itself. The elephant raised one of its colossal legs and struck the attacking fleet from the sea in a single devastating blow, then returned at once to its endless walking, as obedient as ever. In that brief moment, the world glimpsed what Zunisha truly is. Not a gentle island animal, but a sleeping force of staggering power, held in check by an old sentence and answering only to the right voice. The matter of whose voice it answers to opens one of the most important connections in the whole story. The voice of all things is extraordinarily rare. Only a handful of people across the entire series have ever shown it, and the list is telling. The pirate King Roger had it. Momonosuke has it. Luffy has shown signs of it. These are the people tied to the deepest secrets of the world, the ones connected to the buried century and to the warrior of liberation. Zunisha responds to that voice the way an old servant responds to the return of a long-awaited master, which has led many to believe that the creature is not merely an ancient beast, but a deliberate piece of the Void Century's design, placed in the world and bound by rules that point toward a specific future moment and a specific person. That belief grew far stronger during the events in Wano, in a scene that gave Zunisha its most powerful moment in the series so far. When Luffy awakened the full power of his fruit and the ancient drums of liberation began to sound, Zunisha lifted its head and announced, across the open sea, that Joy Boy had returned. The creature that had walked in silence for 1,000 years, carrying a punishment and a memory, recognized the heartbeat of the warrior of liberation the instant it returned to the world. Whatever Zunisha's crime was, whatever sentence it carries, the elephant has plainly been waiting. Across 10 centuries of endless walking, some part of it has been listening for that exact rhythm, for the sign that the one Joy Boy promised would finally come again. This is where the theories grow especially thick, and they are worth walking through carefully, with the reminder that none of them is confirmed. The most popular idea is that Zunisha is itself one of the lost ancient weapons, a living warship cursed into the shape of an elephant and sentenced to wander as punishment for the destruction it once caused. Under this reading, the crime would not be a small misdeed, but an act of terrible power during the Void Century War, and the endless walking would be both a punishment and a way of keeping such a weapon from ever being used again. Others believe the crime is tied to a failure rather than an attack, that Zunisha somehow let down the side it served during the war, perhaps failing to protect the lost kingdom, or failing Joy Boy himself, and now walks in eternal penance, waiting to make amends when the warrior returns. There is even a gentle reading in which the punishment is less a sentence imposed by an enemy and more a duty Zunisha took on willingly, a promise to keep moving until the right moment arrived. Each of these fits some of the clues, and none of them fits all, and the story has not chosen between them, so they remain quiet possibilities drifting around a creature that will not explain itself. The connection to the minx and the Kozuki adds one more layer. On Zunisha's back, the minx guard one of the special road poneglyphs, the rare stones that together point the way to the final island, and they have long held a duty tied to the Kozuki family and to the idea of a coming dawn. So the wandering elephant does not only carry an ancient guilt and an ancient memory, it carries quite literally a piece of the map to the end of the world, protected by a tribe waiting for the same promised future that the creature beneath them has been walking toward for 1,000 years. Everything about Zunisha points in the same direction, toward a moment that is not yet arrived, toward the return of a warrior and the keeping of a promise older than the government itself. What makes Zunisha linger in the mind, long after the louder mysteries have been set aside, is the sheer patience of its suffering. A weapon that can shatter a fleet has spent 1,000 years choosing not to, because it was told to keep walking and nothing more. A witness to the most important century in history has carried that knowledge in silence, never speaking it, bound by a sentence whose terms it has never broken. And through all of it, across 10 centuries of dark water and empty horizon, the creature has been listening for a single heartbeat, the sign that the long walk might finally be coming to an end. When that heartbeat returned in Wano, Zunisha did not stop walking. It simply announced, to a world that mostly could not hear it, that the one it had been waiting for was back at last. And then it placed another foot forward and kept on going, as it always has, toward a dawn that may at last be close. A crime no one can name, a sentence with no end, a country riding on the back of its own guilt, and a witness to a buried century walking in silence through the very seas where that century's secrets are still being uncovered. Of all the mysteries in One Piece, Zunisha may be the one most likely to break the heart, because its answer, whenever it comes, will not only explain a punishment, it will explain what was worth 1,000 years of walking, and who it has been walking toward all along. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Zunisha walks on in silence, an ancient witness carrying a crime it will not name and a memory of the world that was. Yet not every figure connected to the buried past keeps quiet, and one man has spent his life gathering forbidden power in ways that should have killed him many times over. Next, the man who holds two powers no single body was ever meant to carry. Section 7. The man who should not exist. There is a rule in the world of One Piece that is held firm from the very beginning, one of the few laws of that world that seem to have no exceptions at all. A person may eat one devil fruit and gain its power. If that same person ever eats a second devil fruit, their body cannot contain the conflict between the two powers, and they are torn apart from the inside. It is not a maybe. It is treated as a certainty, a line of biology as fixed as gravity. One fruit grants a gift. A second fruit grants a gruesome death. For hundreds of chapters, that rule was simply how the world worked, and no one questioned it, because no one had ever survived breaking it. Then there is Marshall D. Teach, the pirate the world calls Blackbeard. He carries the hidden letter in his name, the same mark of the buried century shared by kings and revolutionaries, and the cheerful boy in the straw hat. And like all of them, he stands somehow at the center of the world's great secrets. But Teach's mystery is not about an ancient promise or a lost kingdom. His mystery is written into his own body, because Blackbeard holds two devil fruits at once, and he is alive. He wields the dark fruit, the most fearsome of all the Logia-type powers, and he wields the tremor fruit, the strongest of the Paramecia type, a power once said to be capable of destroying the world itself. By every rule the story ever taught, that combination should have killed him. Instead, he became one of the 4 emperors who rule the seas. The way he gathered those powers reveals the kind of patience and cruelty that defines him. For decades, Teach hid in plain sight as an ordinary member of the crew of Whitebeard, the mightiest pirate of his age, and he waited. He was not loyal. He was looking for something. When a crewmate of his finally found a particular devil fruit, the dark fruit that Teach had spent years hoping to find, Teach murdered him for it on the spot, took the fruit, and fled into the night. He ate it and gained command over darkness. And later, at the enormous war where Whitebeard fell in battle, Teach did something no one had ever seen before. He covered the body of the dead emperor with a great cloth, and when he emerged, he had somehow taken the old man's tremor fruit power for himself. Two of the most dangerous powers in existence gathered into one body that should not have been able to hold even the second. The first clue to how this is possible lies in the nature of his original fruit. The dark fruit is unlike any other Logia power in the world, and the story has been careful to point this out more than once. Most Logia users become intangible, letting attacks pass harmlessly through their bodies of smoke or flame or light. Teach gains the opposite. His darkness does not let him avoid harm. It pulls things in, dragging objects and even other devil fruit powers toward him like an endless hole that swallows everything. The story compares his darkness to a black hole, a thing of infinite hunger. On contact, it can cancel another person's devil fruit ability entirely, holding them as a helpless, ordinary human while he strikes. And cruelly, his darkness also amplifies pain, so that Teach feels the blows that land on him more sharply than other men would. His power absorbs, it nullifies, and it consumes, and that hungry, swallowing nature sits at the very heart of why he might be able to do what no one else can. There were warnings about Teach's strangeness long before anyone understood it. Whitebeard himself, who had sailed with the man for years, once remarked that Teach's body was unusual, not built the way other men's bodies are, as if the old emperor sensed something abnormal in him without being able to name it. Earlier still, when Luffy first crossed paths with Teach on a small island, the young pirate came away with a strange, unsettled feeling. A sense that there was something more to this cheerful, hungry stranger than a single, ordinary man. These moments were easy to overlook at the time. Looking back, they read like the story quietly planting the idea that Blackbeard is not quite one person in the way everyone else is. That inside that body there may be more than a single will. That idea has grown into the leading explanation for the whole impossible mystery. And it is worth being clear that it remains a theory, supported by a great deal of evidence, but not yet stated outright as fact. The theory holds that Blackbeard possesses more than one soul inside his single body. If a body normally cannot hold two devil fruits because two powers and two wills cannot share one vessel, then a man who somehow contains multiple souls might be the one exception, with each separate soul able to host and control a separate fruit. Under this reading, the dark fruit and its endless void may act as the container that holds the others together, a hungry darkness that keeps the conflicting powers from tearing each other and their owner apart. It is a strange and chilling idea, that the man is less a single person than a vessel carrying several, and the story keeps offering small pieces of support for it. The most striking of those pieces is everywhere on him, hiding in plain sight. The number 3 follows Blackbeard like a shadow. His pirate flag bears not one skull, but 3. He carries 3 pistols. His beard is bound into 3 braids. The weapon he favors strikes with 3 blades. Once a person starts counting, the 3s pile up until they stop feeling like decoration and start feeling like a message. From this grew a related and very popular idea, sometimes called the 3-headed dog theory, which suggests that before he ever took the darkness or the tremors, Teach had already eaten a rare mythical fruit modeled on a beast with 3 heads, each head a separate consciousness capable of holding a power of its own. Whether the souls came from such a fruit, from some quirk of his birth, or from something stranger still, the story has not confirmed, so the exact source remains open. But the 3s are real, and they are deliberate, and they point at a man who is somehow more than one. The newest layer of the mystery reaches all the way back into the buried history the series has been slowly uncovering. And here especially, it is important to tread carefully, because the ground is fresh and far from settled. Recent revelations have brought ancient names back into the story, including a figure remembered as the first king of the world and tied to an old clan, as well as the dreaded pirate of the past who once gathered monsters under a single flag. A growing theory connects Blackbeard's bloodline and his impossible body to these ancient figures, suggesting that the souls he carries may be inheritances from his ancestors, the lingering wills of powerful beings from long ago, contained within his single frame. This idea is exciting precisely because it would tie the darkest pirate of the present age directly into the oldest secrets of the world. But it rests on recent hints rather than firm confirmation, and the story is still arranging the pieces. The honest position is to hold it as a tantalizing possibility, one of several, rather than a settled truth. There is a deeper layer of meaning underneath the mechanics, and it comes from something the brilliant scientist Vegapunk revealed to the world. According to his research, devil fruits are not random magic. They are the shapes of human desire, the physical form of what a person most deeply wishes they could do. If that is true, then a power is an extension of a person's will, of their wanting. And a man who burns with limitless ambition, who hungers endlessly for more strength and more power, and refuses any natural ceiling on what he can hold, becomes a fitting vessel for an impossible collection of abilities. Blackbeard is famous for a single stubborn belief, that a man's dream will never die, and he lives it as a kind of bottomless greed. He does not gather powers because they are useful. He gathers them because his wanting has no end, and his strange body, whatever it truly is, seems built to feed that wanting without ever filling it. All of this points toward a future that many readers see coming. Blackbeard holds the strongest logia and the strongest paramecia, two of the three great categories of devil fruit. The third category is the Zoan type, the beast powers, and it would complete a kind of dark trinity if he ever claimed a powerful one for himself. His crew spends its time hunting down strong devil fruit users, and his methods for taking their powers are brutal and still not fully explained. The strong expectation is that he is not finished, that the man who broke the unbreakable rule once intends to break it again, reaching for a third power to match the threes that already mark his body and his flag. Whether his vessel can hold a third soul and a third fruit is one of the most anticipated questions left in the series, and the story has been building toward an answer for a very long time. What makes Blackbeard so unsettling, in the end, is not only his power but what he represents. He is the warrior of liberation's dark mirror. Both men carry the hidden letter of the buried century. Both are tied to the oldest secrets of the world. Both are racing toward the final island and the truth at the end of the sea. But where the boy in the straw hat fights to set people free and gathers friends who choose to follow him, the man of darkness fights to consume, gathering powers and souls into a single hungry body that always wants more. One carries a will that lives by being shared and passed on. The other carries wills that live by being swallowed and held. They are the two ends of the same ancient story, and the world is slowly being pulled toward the moment they collide. A rule that could not be broken was broken, and the man who broke it is still alive, still hungry, and still climbing. Somewhere inside that single frame there may be several souls, several wills, several inheritances from a past the world tried to forget, all bound together by a darkness that swallows everything it touches. The story has not yet opened him up to show what is truly inside, but every skull on his flag, every braid in his beard, every power he has stolen, points at the same impossible truth. Marshall D. Teach is one body carrying more than one life, a man who should not exist, sailing toward the same answer as the warrior of liberation, intending to take it for himself. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Blackbeard turned his own body into something the rules of the world said was impossible, a hungry vessel reaching back toward the oldest names of the buried past. Yet not every secret bloodline belongs to a villain, and one of the most beloved figures in the entire story turns out to be hiding a lineage that changes everything. Next, the truth behind the red hair, and a famous accusation the story has finally answered. Section 8. The bloodline behind the red hair. Some characters are loved by the audience the way a person loves an old friend, and in One Piece, no one fits that description better than the red-haired pirate named Shanks. He is the man who set the whole story in motion. When Luffy was only a small boy in a tiny village, it was Shanks who inspired him, Shanks who saved his life, and Shanks who placed a worn straw hat on the boy's head and told him to return it one day when he had become a great pirate. That hat, which once belonged to the Pirate King himself, has traveled across every sea on Luffy's head ever since, a quiet promise stitched into the whole adventure. Shanks is warm, brave, and impossibly strong, one of the 4 emperors who rule the most dangerous waters in the world. And for most of the series, he seemed like a pure and simple force for good, a guardian watching over the new generation from a distance. That clean image carried a single crack in it, and the crack would grow into one of the longest-running arguments in the entire fandom. Years ago in the story, after the Great Gathering of Kings, a hooded figure was shown walking into the inner chambers of the Holy Land to speak with the 5 elders, the visible rulers of the world government. The figure wished to discuss a certain pirate, and the elders, who answer to almost no one and bow to almost nothing, treated this visitor with surprising warmth and respect, making time for him precisely because of who he was. The face under the hood was not fully shown, but it looked exactly like Shanks. The same features, the same air, the same red-haired emperor who was supposed to be a friend to the next generation of pirates, sitting comfortably among the very leaders that pirates are meant to fight. That single scene poisoned the well, and from it grew a theory that haunted Shanks for years, often called the evil Shanks theory. If the beloved emperor was on speaking terms with the five elders, the reasoning went, then perhaps he was not the noble guardian everyone believed. Perhaps he was a spy, an informant, a secret servant of the world's rulers. Perhaps the man who gave Luffy his hat would one day stand as an enemy, and the warm mentor would be revealed as a traitor all along. Countless readers spent years building the case, pointing to his strange timing, his unusual freedom to move through dangerous places, and his odd familiarity with the powers that be. Just as many readers refused to believe it, insisting that the man who sacrificed his arm to save a child could not possibly be a villain in disguise. The argument went round and round, with no way to settle it, because the face under that hood had never been clearly shown. The story has now answered the question directly, and the answer reshapes Shanks completely while clearing his name. Recent chapters revealed that Shanks comes from a powerful and ancient bloodline called the Figarland family, a line not of common pirates, but of world nobles, the descendants of the kings who won the Great War of the Void Century and who live above the world as living gods. The beloved emperor, it turns out, was born into the very class of people his life has seemed to oppose. And he is not the only Figarland the story has brought into the light. His father is a man named Figarland Garling, a stern and ruthless figure who has served the world government with total loyalty for his entire life. Garling led an elite and shadowy force of warriors, and recently he rose even higher, taking a seat among the five elders themselves, after one of their number was destroyed in battle. The father of the warmest pirate in the world now sits at the top of the cruelest organization in it. More important still, for the matter of the old accusation, Shanks has a brother. Recent chapters introduced Figarland Shamrock, the older twin of the red-haired emperor, a man who looks remarkably like Shanks and who serves as a commander of that same elite force of warriors, working directly beneath the hidden ruler of the world. A twin, a figure who shares Shanks's face, born into the same noble bloodline, but who walked the opposite path, choosing loyalty to the world's rulers rather than the freedom of the open sea. The moment the existence of an identical twin became known, the years of argument about that hooded meeting collapsed in an instant. And to remove any remaining doubt, the author himself confirmed, in the small question and answer section of a recent volume, that the hooded figure who met with the five elders all those years ago was not Shanks at all. It was Shamrock. That single confirmation closed one of the oldest open questions in the series and cleared the beloved emperor entirely. Shanks never met the five elders. He never whispered about a certain pirate to the rulers of the world. The figure who did all of that was his twin brother, a separate man who happens to wear the same face. The readers who spent years insisting that the man who saved a drowning child could not be a traitor turned out to be right. And the readers who built the case against him had been fooled by a resemblance that the author planted on purpose. It is one of the cleanest examples in the whole story of a long, patient mystery being set up years in advance and then resolved with a quiet, satisfying click. And it is a reminder of how carefully the series hides its answers in plain sight. Clearing Shanks of the old accusation, though, only opened a far larger door, because the truth about his bloodline is in some ways more startling than the theory it replaced. Shanks is not a commoner who rose to greatness. He carries the blood of the world nobles, the same ruthless aristocracy that treats ordinary people as property and lives untouched above the suffering of the world. And yet he became a pirate, the freest kind of life there is, sailing the open sea and protecting the young rather than ruling from a throne in the clouds. How a child of that cold and powerful family came to live such a different life is one of the threads the story is still unwinding. It has been revealed that Shanks was found as an infant around the time of a great and terrible event in the past, taken in and raised far from the Holy Land where his bloodline lives. Exactly how a Figarland baby came to be in that place, and why he was separated from his family and his twin, has not been fully explained, so the details remain open, and the story is clearly saving them for later. The elite force that both his father and his brother belong to deserves a closer look, because it changes the shape of the world the story has been building. These warriors operate directly under the hidden ruler at the very top, separate from the ordinary military that most people fear, working in the shadows and answering to no one below the throne itself. Many soldiers do not even know they exist. They are the secret blade of the world's true master. And in the most recent stretch of the story, they have turned their attention to the land of the giants, threatening it directly. Shanks' own father and brother stand among the most powerful and devoted servants of the figure on the empty throne, which means the red-haired emperor is bound by blood to the very center of the world's oldest secret, on the side that has spent 800 years guarding the buried truth rather than uncovering it. This is what makes Shanks such a fascinating figure now that the old mystery is gone. He stands at a crossroads of every force in the story at once. He carries the straw hat of the Pirate King and passed it to the warrior of liberation, which ties him to the side of freedom and the buried promise. He shares his blood with the rulers of the world and with the secret warriors who serve the hidden throne, which ties him to the side that buried the truth in the first place. He has met with Luffy's enemies and Luffy's allies alike, moved freely through places no ordinary pirate could go, and chosen, again and again, to act as a quiet guardian rather than a conqueror. Where his true loyalties will land when the final conflict comes is one of the most interesting open questions left in the series, and the answer is far from certain. The story has cleared him of being a simple traitor, but it has not yet shown which side he will stand on when the warrior of liberation and the hidden ruler finally meet. There are gentler mysteries tangled into his bloodline as well, and they are worth holding lightly until the story reveals more. The reasons he left his powerful family, the nature of his bond or rivalry with the twin who chose the opposite path, and the meaning of his connection to that great event of the past are all still being filled in piece by piece. Some readers believe the parting of the twins will become one of the emotional cores of the endgame, two brothers with the same face who chose freedom and obedience, and who may have to face each other before the story ends. Others wonder whether Shanks, knowing the truth of his own bloodline, has been quietly working against his family's masters this whole time, using his freedom and his strength to protect the future they fear. These are reasonable guesses built on solid hints, but they remain guesses, and the story has not committed to any of them. What stands firmly, after years of suspicion, is a kind of quiet vindication. The man who gave a small boy his hat, who lost an arm to save that boy's life, who has watched over the new generation from a distance and protected the balance of the world, was never the traitor that a single hooded scene made him seem. The face in that chamber belonged to his brother. Shanks himself remained exactly what he always appeared to be, a free man who chose warmth over power and the open sea over a throne in the clouds, even though he was born into the cruelest bloodline in the world. That choice, to be born among the gods of the world and to walk away from them, may turn out to be the most important thing about him. A beloved figure was accused, defended, and finally cleared, and in the clearing the story revealed something larger than anyone expected. The red-haired emperor carries the blood of the world's rulers, shares his face with one of their secret servants, and yet gave the warrior of liberation the very hat he sails under. Whatever side he chooses when the end arrives, Shanks stands as living proof that a person is not bound to the cruelty of the blood they are born with, and that even a child of the gods of the world can choose instead to be free. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Shanks turned out to carry the blood of the world's rulers, and still chose the open sea, a child of the gods who walked away from the clouds. Yet the story hides secrets even larger than hidden bloodlines, reaching past the seas and into the sky, the moon, and the very nature of the powers that shape this world. Next, the older world above, and the strangest history of all. Section 9. The sky, the moon, and the older world. Most adventure stories have an edge to their world. There is a map, and the map has borders. And beyond the borders, there is nothing the story ever bothers to explain. One Piece is not built that way. The deeper a person travels into it, the larger the world becomes, until it stops being a world at all and starts feeling like a planet with a long and frightening history. The seas are only the surface of it. Above the clouds, there are islands floating in the sky, full of people who have never set foot on the ground below. And far past the sky, the story has quietly confirmed something that turns the whole adventure on its head. There is a moon, and once, long ago, there were people living on it. The Sky Islands were the first hint that the world reached higher than anyone assumed. Travelers who climbed past the clouds discovered entire lands sitting on what the story calls island clouds, solid enough to build cities on, home to people with wings and customs all their own. One of those sky islands was a place called Burka, the homeland of a man named Enel, a ruler who believed himself a god. Enel's story took a strange turn after his defeat, and it is here that the world cracked open into something far stranger than floating cities. Enel built a great flying ark and used it to travel away from the world entirely, up and out, all the way to the moon. And on the moon, in the silence and the dust, he found the ruins of a city. The moon, it turns out, was not always empty. The ruins Enel discovered were the remains of an ancient civilization, a people who had lived there in the distant past and then vanished. Among the ruins he found old machines, automata built in the shape of beings, sleeping quietly through the centuries. And on the walls he found murals, paintings left behind by the people of the moon to record their own history. Those murals told a story that reaches under everything else in the series. The people of the moon, the murals showed, had run short of the resources they needed to survive. And so long ago they had left their dying home and descended, down through the dark, to settle on the world below. The winged people of the Sky Islands, and others scattered across the world, appear to be the distant descendants of those who came down from the moon. The history of the world of One Piece does not begin on its seas. It may begin in the sky, with a people who fell to the planet from somewhere even higher. This single thread reorders the whole sense of how old and how advanced the world's hidden past truly was. The lost kingdom of the Void Century was always described as remarkably advanced, ahead of its age in ways that frightened those who came after. The discovery of the Moon People offers a possible reason for that. If the bloodlines and the knowledge of an ancient spacefaring people flowed down into the world long ago, then the advanced technology of the buried century may not have been a sudden miracle. It may have been an inheritance, a memory of a higher and older civilization carried down through the generations until it bloomed in the kingdom that the world would later try to erase. The story has not connected every dot here, and much of this remains a careful reading rather than a stated fact, so it is best held as a powerful possibility. But the pieces lean strongly in one direction. The buried century was advanced because the world itself has a history far deeper and far stranger than its modern maps suggest. The ancient machines tie this idea directly into the recent events of the story. On the moon, Enel found inactive robots, automata from the lost civilization. And much later, on the island of the world's greatest scientist, an enormous ancient robot was discovered, a machine that had crashed into the island roughly 2 centuries earlier, built during the Void Century itself. That robot had sat lifeless for a very long time. Then, in the presence of the warrior of liberation, it woke, it moved, it spoke, and it reacted to Luffy as though it recognized something in him, as though it had been waiting. An advanced machine from the buried century, sharing a clear family resemblance with the sleeping robots on the moon, stirring back to life at the return of the ancient warrior. The technology of the moon, the technology of the lost kingdom, and the promise of Joy Boy all touched in that single moment. And the implication is enormous. The same deep history connects the sky, the moon, the buried century, and the boy in the straw hat. There is a layer beneath even the technology, and it reaches into the very nature of the powers that define the series. The brilliant scientist Vegapunk, who has studied these things more deeply than anyone alive, proposed an idea about devil fruits that quietly reframes the whole world. According to his research, devil fruits are not random gifts or magic stones. They are the embodiment of human desire, the physical shape of what people most deeply wish they could do or become. A fruit that lets a person fly is the dream of flight made real. A fruit that lets a person command fire is the dream of holding fire made solid. Vegapunk went further still, suggesting that these powers may represent a kind of evolution waiting to happen, the dreams of humanity taking form ahead of their time. Under this reading, the mythical fruit that carries the sun god's name is not only a weapon, it is an ancient dream of freedom itself, given a body, waiting across the centuries to return. The honest position is that Vegapunk's theory, while spoken aloud in the story, is still an idea rather than a proven law, and it leaves many questions open. But it suggests that even the powers people take for granted are tangled up in the world's hidden history and its strange, long memory. The newest and most dizzying layer arrived only recently, in the records kept among the giants, and it pushes the world's history back further than the Void Century by an enormous margin. Ancient murals and old texts uncovered there describe a history not of one buried century, but of multiple ages of the world, separate eras that rose and fell across vast stretches of time. The records speak of a first world that came to an end through the power of something remembered as a serpent of fire, a catastrophe that wiped a whole age away. They name a figure remembered as the very first king of the world, tied to an old clan, a name powerful enough to enrage the hidden ruler when it was spoken. These revelations are extremely recent, and the story is still laying them out one careful piece at a time. So almost everything about them remains open and uncertain. What they suggest, though, is staggering. The Void Century may not be the bottom of the world's hidden history. It may only be the most recent floor in a building that goes down through age after age, civilization after civilization, each one rising and falling and leaving its ruins for the next to misunderstand. It is in this section more than any other that the theories run wildest, and they deserve to be named clearly as theories. One idea connects the naming of everything to the heavens themselves. The world's 3 great weapons are named after gods who are also planets, and some readers have built a grand pattern out of this, casting the hidden ruler as the personification of the world itself, the visible elders as the elder planets, and the warrior of liberation as the sun, with the moon left as a mysterious final piece. Another widely discussed idea looks at the rulers who live above the world nobles, and notes that they wear strange bubble-shaped helmets over their heads, helmets that resemble the kind of protection a person might wear to breathe in a place without air. From this grew the theory that the rulers of the world are themselves descended from the people of the moon, and that their helmets are a faded relic of an origin they no longer remember or no longer admit. None of these ideas has been confirmed, and some may turn out to be entirely wrong, so they are offered here as the strange and beautiful speculation that they are, the kind of dreaming that a world this deep invites. What all of these threads share, the canon and the speculation alike, is a single, overwhelming feeling. The world of One Piece is far, far older than its heroes know, and it has been hiding that age in plain sight the entire time. The floating islands, the abandoned moon, the ancient robots, the dreaming nature of the fruits, the murals of fallen ages, all of them whisper the same thing. There were people here before, many times over, who rose high and reached far and then fell, leaving ruins that their descendants now mistake for myth. The modern world, with its government and its emperors and its maps, sits on top of all of that like a thin layer of new snow over very old ground. And the buried century, terrible as it is, may only be the most recent of many secrets the world has swallowed. This is why the search at the heart of the story has always felt bigger than treasure. To uncover the truth of the Void Century is not simply to learn who won an old war. It is to begin pulling on a thread that runs up into the sky, out to the moon, and back through ages of the world that no living person remembers. The warrior of liberation is not only sailing toward an island and a prize, he is sailing toward the bottom of a history so deep that even the rulers who guard it may not fully understand what they are protecting. Somewhere in that long descent, in the ruins of the moon and the murals of the giants and the dreams sleeping inside the fruits, lies the real shape of the world. And the story has spent its entire run lowering the audience down toward it, one careful step at a time. The seas were never the whole of it. The horizon was never the edge. Above the clouds there were cities, and beyond the cities there was a moon with ruins on it. And beneath the modern world there are ages stacked on ages, each one ended by some forgotten catastrophe and buried under the next. Whatever waits at the end of the sea, it is bound up with all of this, with a world that fell from the sky long ago and has been forgetting itself ever since. And as the warrior of liberation draws closer to the final island, he carries, without knowing it, the dreams of that older world and the fruit he ate as a child. The same freedom that an ancient people once reached for before they fell. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The world reaches up into the sky and out to the moon, and down through age after buried age, far older and stranger than any of its heroes know. All of it, every secret and every fallen world, points toward a single island at the very end of the sea, and the one treasure that ties the whole story together. Next, the tale worth laughing at, and what truly waits on the final island. Section 10. The tale worth laughing at. At the very end of the most dangerous sea in the world, past every charted island and every named current, there is a piece of land that almost no one has ever seen. For most of the story, it did not even have a proper name, only a half-remembered title whispered among pirates, a place spoken of the way people speak of heaven or the edge of the world. Sailors called it the last island, the final destination, the place where the greatest treasure in existence is said to wait. And the strange thing about this island is that no ordinary navigation can take a ship there. The instruments that guide sailors across the rest of the world, the special compasses that lock onto an island's magnetic pull, all of them stop short. They lead only as far as the island just before the end, a place called Lodestar Island. And there, the paths simply run out. The final island lies beyond the reach of any normal map, hidden from the world by the very rules of how the world is crossed. There is only one way to find it, and that way is the whole reason the buried century matters so much to the people chasing the dream. Scattered across the world are 4 special stones, a rare kind of the indestructible poneglyphs known as the road poneglyphs. Each one holds a single piece of a location, a point on the great ocean, and on their own, they mean almost nothing. But when all 4 are read together, the 4 points they describe form a pattern, and where those points meet, the last island sits waiting. This is why the government guards the ancient script so jealously, why it destroyed an island of scholars, why a quiet woman able to read stone became one of the most hunted people alive. The path to the greatest treasure in the world is written in the language of the people the world tried to erase, which means the treasure and the buried century were always the same secret seen from 2 different sides. Only one crew in living memory has ever made the full journey and stood on that final shore. The Pirate King, Gol D. Roger, gathered the 4 points, crossed the last stretch of sea, and reached the island at the end of everything. What happened there is one of the most carefully guarded moments in the whole story. But a few things are known. Roger and his crew found the treasure that had been left there long before them. They learned the truth of the void century, the real history of the buried 100 years. They learned the true nature of the ancient weapons, and they learned the meaning of the hidden letter, the D carried by kings and outlaws across the centuries. Everything the world had been forbidden to know was waiting on that island, the complete answer to every question the story has been built around. And when the Pirate King and his crew finally understood all of it, they did not weep, and they did not fall silent in awe. They laughed. That laughter gave the island its real name. Roger called it a tale full of laughs, and from that he named the place Laugh Tale, a name that hides a small joke and a deep mystery at the same time. Whatever Roger found at the end of the world struck him as funny, genuinely and helplessly funny, the kind of thing a person laughs at because it is so unexpected, so absurd, or so perfectly fitting that no other reaction will do. The most powerful pirate who ever lived crossed every sea, solved the greatest puzzle in history, and arrived at an answer that made him burst out laughing. Understanding why is one of the last great questions the series has left to answer, and it sits right at the heart of what the treasure truly is. The treasure left there did not begin with Roger at all. Long before him, during the buried century itself, the warrior of liberation called Joy Boy left something on that final island, a treasure of his own, set down at the end of the world for a future that had not yet arrived. Roger and his crew were the next to reach it, and they added their own treasures to what Joy Boy had left behind. After Roger's death, when he announced to the whole world that his treasure was real and could be claimed by anyone bold enough to find it, the world began calling that great hoard by a single name. They called it the One Piece. So the treasure at the end of the sea is not only Roger's prize. It is older than Roger, reaching back to the warrior of the buried century, a thing passed forward across 800 years, the same way the hidden letter and the broken promise were passed forward, waiting for the right hands to finally claim it. That the treasure is real and not merely a legend has been confirmed by people in a position to know. The mighty Whitebeard, with the whole world listening at the Great War, declared plainly that the One Piece exists, and warned that the day it is found, the world will be dragged into a conflict greater than anything it has ever seen. Roger's old right hand, a man who actually stood on the final island and saw the treasure with his own eyes, told the scholar Robin that it is real, and that the discovery of the truth would turn the world upside down. The scientist who has studied the buried century more deeply than anyone alive has tied the treasure directly to the fate of the world itself. And the author of the story has stated outright that the treasure is a real, tangible thing, an actual object that exists, rather than only a pretty idea or a lesson about friendship. Whatever the One Piece is, it is something a person could hold, and it is powerful enough that the rulers of the world have spent centuries making sure no one reaches it. What the treasure actually is remains the single greatest unanswered question in the series, And here it is only fair to step fully into the realm of theory, because the story has guarded this answer above all others. The simplest reading is that the One Piece is exactly what it sounds like: an enormous hoard of gold and riches and ancient valuables, the accumulated wealth of the pirate king and the warrior before him. Most readers find that reading too small on its own, given everything the story has built, and so the deeper theories try to explain why finding the treasure would shake the world rather than simply make one pirate rich. One powerful idea holds that the true heart of the treasure is knowledge, the complete and unbroken true history of the world, perhaps in the form of the legendary stone called the Rio Poneglyph, the single tablet that ties all the others together and finally tells the whole buried story. Under this reading, the One Piece is dangerous because truth is dangerous. To reveal what really happened during the Void Century would destroy the lie the government was built on, and a lie that is held for 800 years does not collapse quietly. Another family of theories looks at the name itself, the One Piece, and finds a hidden meaning in it. There is a great wall of land and a system of currents that divides the world's oceans into separate seas, keeping them apart and keeping the world fractured. Some believe the treasure is connected to a way of breaking that wall, of joining the divided oceans back into a single sea, literally making the world one piece again, whole and connected the way it may have been long ago. In this reading, Joy Boy's dream was not only to free people from chains, but to reunite a world that had been deliberately split apart, and the treasure is the key to finishing that work. It is a beautiful idea, tying the name of the prize directly to the warrior's promise of liberation. Though, like the others, it remains a theory the story has not confirmed. There are gentler readings as well, ones that lean into the warmth that runs underneath the whole adventure. One long-standing idea connects the treasure to an old song that drifts through the series, a sailor's song about sharing a drink and a journey, and suggests that the final answer involves something meant to be shared with the entire world, a gift that unites people in joy rather than fear, the kind of thing a warrior of liberation would leave behind. Another reading, more thematic than literal, holds that the truest treasure Luffy will find is the journey itself, and the people he gathered along the way, the bonds formed across every island and every battle. The author has been careful to insist that a real, physical treasure does wait at the end, so this thematic reading cannot be the whole of it. But the two need not contradict. The story may well give its hero both, a tangible treasure that shakes the world, and a deeper treasure that was his all along. And Roger's laughter may be the sound of a man realizing that the grandest secret in the world and the simplest truth about it were the same thing. That laughter is the clue that ties the theories together. Roger did not arrive at the end of the world and find something grim or frightening. He found something that struck him as a wonderful, ridiculous joke. And then he said the words that have echoed through the series ever since. He and his crew, he said, had come too early. They had been born in the wrong era. The most coherent reading of this is that Roger understood everything at last, understood Joy Boy's plan and the buried truth and the meaning of it all, and realized that the answer was correct and waiting and entirely real, but that it could not yet be used. The conditions for it had not arrived. The right person had not yet been born, or had not yet grown strong enough, or the world was not yet ready to receive the truth. Roger laughed because he had crossed every sea to reach an answer he could not act on, and because he understood that someone else, someone who came after him, would be the one to finish it. So he left the treasure where it was, told the world it was real, and trusted the future to send the person the buried century had been waiting for all along. That person appears to be sailing now. The warrior of liberation returned to the world. The drums sounded again, and the boy who carries the ancient promise is moving steadily toward the last island, gathering the road stones one by one. If Roger came too early, then the entire shape of the story suggests that Luffy may be arriving exactly on time, in the era the buried century was waiting for, with the warrior's power awakened and the warrior's friends beside him. The treasure that Roger could only laugh at and leave behind may finally be something that can be claimed and used, not by the pirate king who came too soon, but by the cheerful boy who arrived when the world was at last ready to change. This is where every thread of the long mystery gathers into a single point, and it is worth drawing them together one last time, softly. The buried century gave the world a truth it could not speak, and that truth is waiting on the final island. The hidden letter gave the truth a line of messengers to carry it forward, and the newest of them is sailing toward that island now. The figure on the empty throne has guarded the lie for 800 years, precisely so that no one would ever reach what waits there. The warrior of liberation made a promise that can only be kept at the end of the sea. The ancient weapons, the silent wandering witness, the dark pirate reaching for forbidden power, the red-haired emperor caught between bloodlines, the fallen older world stacked in buried ages beneath the present one. All of it bends toward the same distant shore. Laugh-Tale is not simply where the treasure sits. It is where every secret in the entire story finally meets, the single place where the buried past and the promised future are meant to touch. What makes the ending of this long search feel so different from an ordinary treasure hunt is that the prize was never really the point. Roger did not laugh because he had become rich. He laughed because he understood something. Some truth so large or so simple or so unexpectedly hopeful that the only honest response was joy. The whole story has been quietly arguing that the most valuable thing in the world is not gold or power, but the truth of who people are and where they come from, and the freedom to choose what to do with that truth once it is known. The government built its entire order on hiding that truth. The warrior of liberation has spent the whole story setting people free, one island at a time, usually without even knowing he was part of something ancient. When those two forces finally meet at the end of the sea, over the treasure that Joy Boy and Roger both left behind, the story will at last reveal what was worth a buried century. 1,000 years of walking, 800 years of waiting, and a single helpless burst of laughter at the end of the world. For now, the island sleeps at the edge of the map, holding its answer in patient silence, the way it has for 800 years. The roadstones drift across the world, hidden in the dark and guarded by old promises. The drums of liberation have sounded again, and a boy in a straw hat sails steadily toward the place where every mystery in this vast and tender story is gathered and waiting. Whatever truly waits on Laugh-Tale, whatever made the Pirate King laugh until his crew laughed with him, it has been calling across the centuries to exactly one kind of person. The kind who would cross every sea not for riches, but for freedom, and who would arrive at the greatest secret in the world and, like the king before him, find something there worth laughing about. The tale began with a missing 100 years. It will end on the one island where those years are finally remembered, and where the longest, strangest, gentlest mystery in all of fiction will at last be allowed to speak. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.